Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Library. It's lovely to have you here tonight. Before we begin, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Perhaps you're nestled in bed with the curtains drawn, or maybe you're on a quiet evening walk, watching the sky darken. Wherever you are, I hope you're comfortable, safe, and ready to let your thoughts wander slowly through one of Earth's most magnificent landscapes. If you enjoy these gentle explorations and would like more of them, a like and subscribe truly helps this little channel find its way to others who need a peaceful moment. Tonight, we're traveling north, far to the northwest corner of the continent, to a place so vast it defies easy description. Alaska. Even the name feels spacious, doesn't it? It rolls off the tongue with a sense of openness, of distant horizons. The word itself comes from the Aleut language, from Alyeska or Alaksak, which translates roughly to great land or that which the sea breaks against. And great it is. Alaska is enormous in ways that challenge comprehension. At 570,380 square miles, it's the largest state in the United States by a considerable margin. To give you a sense of scale, Alaska is larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. If you placed Alaska's westernmost point on San Francisco, its easternmost edge would reach all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. The state stretches 2,400 miles from east to west and 1,420 miles from north to south. But size is just numbers. What makes Alaska truly remarkable is what fills that space. Imagine, if you will, a landscape where glaciers the size of small countries carve through mountain ranges, where valleys stretch for hundreds of miles, untouched by roads or towns, where coastlines wind and fold for over 33,900 miles when you count all the islands and inlets. That's more shoreline than all the other United States combined, doubled. Alaska contains approximately 23,000 square miles of glaciers, an area nearly the size of West Virginia. The state is home to over 100,000 glaciers, though only about 650 have been given names. These rivers of ice hold stories written in layers of compressed snow, some thousands of years old. Let's start our journey in the southeast, in what's known as the Alaska Panhandle. This is a narrow strip of land, between 25 and 50 miles wide, that extends down along the coast like a long finger pointing south toward Canada and the Pacific Northwest. Here, the landscape is defined by water and mountains in constant conversation. The Inside Passage weaves between hundreds of islands, creating a protected waterway that has served as a highway for thousands of years. The Alexander Archipelago alone contains over 1,100 islands, each one a world unto itself, covered in temperate rainforest. This is where the Tongass National Forest spreads across nearly 17 million acres, making it the largest national forest in the United States. Ancient trees, western hemlock, Sitka spruce, and yellow cedar rise in dense stands, their branches heavy with moisture from the constant rainfall. In some places here, over 150 inches of rain fall each year. That's more than 12 feet of water descending from the sky annually, nourishing a forest so thick and green it feels almost primordial. The forest floor is carpeted with moss that glows in shades of emerald and jade, so soft it seems to swallow sound. Ferns unfurl in the understory, and fallen logs, some as wide as a car, slowly return to the earth, covered in new growth. The towns in southeast Alaska cling to the edges of this wilderness, most accessible only by boat or plane. Juneau, the state capital, sits wedged between mountains and water. Behind the city, the Juneau icefield stretches for 1,500 square miles, a vast expanse of interconnected glaciers that has existed for thousands of years. This icefield feeds dozens of glaciers, including the Mendenhall Glacier, which flows down toward the city like a frozen river in slow motion. You can stand at its terminus and watch massive chunks of ice carve into the lake, each piece falling with a sound like distant thunder, sending ripples across the turquoise water. Moving north from the Panhandle, you encounter the coastal mountains, including the spectacular St. Elias Mountains. This range contains some of the highest peaks in North America, including Mount St. Elias, which rises 18,008 feet above sea level. The mountain marks the point where the Alaska-Yukon border shifts from following the coast to following the 141st meridian due north. The St. Elias Range is so heavily glaciated that in some areas, ice and snow cover the landscape almost entirely. The Bagley Icefield here is one of the largest subpolar icefields in North America. Just southwest of the St. Elias Range lies the Chugach Mountains, which arc around Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula. These mountains rise directly from the sea in many places, their peaks dusted with snow even in summer. Prince William Sound is a complex network of fjords, islands, and passages where tidewater glaciers meet the ocean. The Sound's waters are deep and protected, creating habitat for an abundance of marine life. Sea otters float on, their backs among kelp forests, cracking open shellfish with rocks balanced on their chests. Harbor seals haul themselves onto ice floes carved from glaciers, their spotted coats glistening wet. Orcas patrol the deeper channels, their distinctive black and white patterns cutting through the water like living art. The Kenai Peninsula extends south from Anchorage like a thumb, its western shore facing Cook Inlet and its eastern side opening to the Gulf of Alaska. The peninsula is a microcosm of Alaskan geography, containing mountains, glaciers, forests, rivers, and coastline in a relatively compact area. The Harding Icefield covers the spine of the peninsula, receiving an average of 60 feet of snow each year. From this icefield, over 30 glaciers flow outward. Exit Glacier, one of the most accessible glaciers in Alaska, allows visitors to walk right up to the ice and see the layers of compressed snow, hear the trickle of meltwater, and feel the cold air radiating from thousands of years of accumulated winter. Anchorage, Alaska's largest city, sits on a coastal plain between the Chugach Mountains and Cook Inlet. With a population of around 290,000, it's home to over half of Alaska's residents. But even here, in the state's urban center, wilderness is never far away. Moose wander through neighborhoods, browsing on ornamental trees and shrubs. Black bears occasionally appear in parks. From downtown on a clear day, you can see across Cook Inlet to the volcanoes of the Alaska Peninsula, their snow-covered peaks floating on the horizon like distant dreams. Cook Inlet itself is named after Captain James Cook, who explored this area in 1778 while searching for the Northwest Passage. The inlet is known for having some of the highest tides in North America, with a tidal range that can exceed 30 feet. This creates swift currents and dangerous bore tides that race up the inlet twice daily, sometimes creating waves several feet high that travel against the current. West of Cook Inlet, the Alaska Peninsula extends southwestward for over 500 miles, eventually fragmenting into the Aleutian Islands. This is a landscape of dramatic contrasts, where active volcanoes rise from the sea, their slopes covered in wildflowers during the brief summer. The peninsula and the Aleutians form part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, that great arc of volcanic activity that circles the Pacific Ocean. Alaska contains over 70 volcanoes, with several erupting in recent decades. Volcanic ash from these eruptions can be carried hundreds of miles by prevailing winds, occasionally disrupting air travel. The Aleutian Islands stretch westward in a graceful arc for over 1,200 miles, creating a bridge of sorts between North America and Asia. These islands are the peaks of underwater volcanoes, some still active, others long dormant. The climate here is maritime and cool, with persistent fog, strong winds, and frequent storms. The native Aleut people have lived on these islands for thousands of years, developing a sophisticated maritime culture adapted to the challenging environment. They became expert kayakers, hunting seals and sea otters from sleek, skin-covered boats that could navigate through the roughest seas. The Aleutians cross the 180th meridian, which means Alaska can claim to be both the westernmost and easternmost state in the United States, depending on how you measure. Attu Island, the westernmost point, is actually in the Eastern Hemisphere. During World War II, Japanese forces occupied Attu and Kiska Islands, making this the only part of the United States to be occupied by enemy forces during the war. The harsh battle to retake Attu in 1943 resulted in heavy losses on both sides, with the brutal weather and terrain proving as deadly as combat. North of the Alaska Peninsula lies Bristol Bay, one of the most productive salmon fisheries in the world. Each summer, millions of sockeye salmon return to the rivers that feed into the bay, creating one of nature's great migrations. The abundance of salmon supports not just commercial fisheries, but also one of the largest concentrations of brown bears in the world. At places like Brooks Falls in Katmai National Park, bears gather in numbers during the salmon runs, positioning themselves at the falls to catch fish as they leap upstream. You can watch a 600-pound brown bear standing in the cascading water, catching 20-pound salmon in mid-air, with timing so precise it seems choreographed. Bristol Bay's significance extends beyond salmon. The bay and its watershed represent a complete ecosystem largely intact, a rare thing in our modern world. The rivers that feed the bay run clear and cold, originating in mountains and tundra, flowing through wetlands that serve as nurseries for countless species. The native peoples of this region, including the Yupik and Dena'ina, have sustained themselves on salmon for thousands of years, developing deep cultural connections to the fish and the rhythms of their return. Moving north into the interior, the landscape changes dramatically. The Alaska Range cuts across the state from southwest to northeast, creating a barrier between the relatively mild coastal areas and the continental climate of the interior. This range contains Denali, formerly known as Mount McKinley, the highest peak in North America at 20,320 feet. Denali is a massive mountain by any standard, rising over 18,000 feet from its base, with a vertical relief greater than Mount Everest's when measured from base to summit. Denali's indigenous name means the Tall One or the Great One in the Koyukon language, and it's an apt description. The mountain creates its own weather systems, generating storms that can last for days. High winds regularly exceed 100 miles per hour near the summit. The temperature at the top can plunge to -75 degrees Fahrenheit. Climbing Denali is a serious undertaking, requiring weeks of effort, careful acclimatization, and respect for the mountain's power. Many who attempt it turn back. Some never return. Denali National Park and Preserve surrounds the mountain, protecting over 6 million acres of wilderness. This is one of the few places in Alaska where visitors can reliably see the Big Five of Alaskan wildlife: grizzly bears, moose, caribou, Dall sheep, and wolves. The park's single road winds for 92 miles through varied terrain, from taiga forest to alpine tundra to high mountain passes. Most of the road is closed to private vehicles, accessible only by park buses, which ensures that wildlife viewing remains possible without overwhelming the animals or the landscape. The grizzly bears here are smaller than their coastal cousins, who feast on salmon, but they're no less impressive. Interior grizzlies survive on a varied diet of berries, roots, ground squirrels, and occasionally larger prey. They spend the short summer fattening up for the long winter hibernation, during which a pregnant female will give birth to cubs, nursing them in the den until spring. Moose in Alaska are the largest subspecies of moose in the world. A bull can weigh up to 1,600 pounds and stand 7 feet tall at the shoulder. Their massive palmate antlers, which they shed and regrow each year, can span 6 feet. Despite their size, moose are surprisingly agile, able to run at speeds up to 35 miles per hour and swim strongly across rivers and lakes. Caribou migrate across the interior in herds that can number in the hundreds of thousands. The porcupine caribou herd, one of the largest, travels up to 400 miles between its winter range and summer calving grounds. This migration, repeated annually for countless generations, represents one of the last great ungulate migrations on Earth. Both male and female caribou grow antlers, unique among deer species, and they use these antlers to dig through snow to reach the lichens and plants beneath. Dall sheep inhabit the high country, their white coats providing camouflage against snow and rock. They're remarkably sure-footed, able to navigate cliffs and steep slopes that seem impossibly treacherous. Rams grow massive curved horns that continue to grow throughout their lives, with the rings on the horns providing a rough indication of age. Wolves in Alaska live in packs, highly social and cooperative, working together to hunt prey much larger than themselves. A pack's territory can span hundreds of square miles. They communicate through howls that can carry for miles, an eerie and beautiful sound that speaks of wilderness in its purest form. The interior of Alaska is characterized by broad river valleys and rolling hills covered in boreal forest. This is the taiga, a landscape of black spruce, white spruce and birch trees with vast wetlands and muskeg in the low-lying areas. Permafrost underlies much of this region, creating unique challenges for anything built here. The ground remains frozen year-round below a certain depth, with only the top layer thawing in summer. This active layer can be just a few feet deep, and buildings, roads, and pipelines must be designed to account for the expansion and contraction caused by freeze-thaw cycles. Fairbanks, Alaska's second-largest city with a population around 32,000, sits in the heart of the interior. The city experiences extreme temperature swings, with summer highs occasionally reaching 90 degrees Fahrenheit and winter lows sometimes dropping to -60 or below. This continental climate creates the conditions for one of Alaska's most famous phenomena, the aurora borealis, or northern lights. The aurora appears when charged particles from the sun, carried on the solar wind, collide with gases in Earth's upper atmosphere. The collisions cause the gases to glow, creating ribbons and curtains of light that shimmer and dance across the night sky. The most common color is a luminous green, but the aurora can also appear in shades of pink, purple, red, and even blue. The lights move and shift, sometimes slowly, sometimes with startling speed, as though the sky itself is breathing. Fairbanks sits beneath what's called the auroral oval, a ring around the North Pole where aurora activity is most intense. During the aurora season, which runs from late August through April, visitors to Fairbanks have an excellent chance of seeing the lights. On clear, cold nights, far from the city lights, the aurora can be spectacular, filling the sky from horizon to horizon. The experience is almost spiritual, standing in the frigid darkness, watching light cascade and flow overhead. Ancient photons completing their journey from the sun to put on a show that humans have watched and wondered at for millennia. The Yukon River, one of the great rivers of North America, flows through the heart of Alaska's interior. Originating in Canada's Yukon Territory, the river enters Alaska near the town of Eagle and winds westward for over 1,200 miles before emptying into the Bering Sea. Along its course, it gathers water from countless tributaries, draining a vast watershed. The river served as a highway for indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and later became the primary route for prospectors during the Gold Rush era. The Klondike Gold Rush of 1896 to 1899 brought tens of thousands of people flooding north, though most of the gold was actually in Canada's Yukon Territory rather than Alaska. Still, Alaska benefited from the influx, with towns like Skagway and Nome booming. The rush for gold, and later for other minerals, left its mark on the landscape and culture. Ghost towns dot the interior, abandoned when the ore ran out. Rusty equipment slowly returns to the earth, but the spirit of that era, the sense of Alaska as a frontier, as a place where fortunes could be made and lives transformed, persists. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline stretches 800 miles from Prudhoe Bay on the Arctic Ocean to Valdez on the southern coast. Built in the 1970s, following the discovery of massive oil reserves on the North Slope, the pipeline was an engineering marvel, designed to transport oil across permafrost, mountains, rivers, and earthquake zones. The pipeline is elevated on supports for much of its length to prevent the hot oil from melting the permafrost. It has become an iconic symbol of Alaska's economic relationship with resource extraction, representing both opportunity and controversy. North of the Alaska Range and the interior lies the Brooks Range, another great mountain chain that stretches from west to east across northern Alaska. These mountains are more remote, more rugged, and less visited than those farther south. The Brooks Range marks the transition from the boreal forest to the Arctic tundra. North of these mountains, trees give way to low shrubs, grasses, and hardy flowering plants that bloom briefly during the short Arctic summer. The Arctic coastal plain, often called the North Slope, extends from the Brooks Range north to the Arctic Ocean. This is a flat, treeless landscape of tundra, countless small lakes and ponds, and permafrost. The coastal waters are frozen 8 months of the year, with only a brief summer window when the sea ice retreats. This is polar bear country. These magnificent animals, the largest land carnivores on Earth, are perfectly adapted to life on the sea ice, where they hunt seals. A polar bear's life revolves around the sea ice. They use it as a platform for hunting, traveling vast distances in search of seals, their primary prey. When a bear detects a seal's breathing hole in the ice, it may wait motionless for hours, sometimes days, until the seal surfaces to breathe. Then, with explosive speed, the bear strikes. In recent decades, as Arctic sea ice has declined due to climate change, polar bears have faced increasing challenges. Less sea ice means less access to hunting grounds, forcing bears to spend more time on land where food is scarce. The midnight sun is another phenomenon of the far north. Because of Alaska's high latitude, the sun doesn't set at all during the height of summer in the northernmost parts of the state. In Utqiagvik, formerly known as Barrow, the northernmost settlement in the United States, the sun remains above the horizon continuously from mid-May through the end of July. The opposite occurs in winter, when the sun doesn't rise at all for over 60 days. This extreme variation in daylight affects everything: wildlife behavior, plant growth, human psychology, and culture. Alaska's marine environments are incredibly rich. The cold, nutrient-dense waters of the Gulf of Alaska, the Bering Sea, and the Arctic Ocean support an abundance of life. 5 species of Pacific salmon spawn in Alaska's rivers: Chinook, sockeye, coho, pink, and chum. Each species has its own timing, its own preferred rivers and streams. The salmon's life cycle is one of nature's great dramas. Born in freshwater, the young salmon eventually migrate to the ocean, where they spend years growing and maturing. Then, driven by instinct and perhaps by scent memory, they return to the very streams where they were born. They swim upstream against powerful currents, leaping waterfalls, navigating rapids, traveling sometimes hundreds of miles. Once they reach their spawning grounds, they mate, lay eggs, and then, exhausted, perish. Their bodies return nutrients to the river system, feeding the next generation. Humpback whales spend their summers in Alaskan waters, feeding on the rich abundance of small fish and krill. These massive creatures, which can weigh 40 tons and reach lengths of 50 feet, breach spectacularly, launching themselves almost entirely out of the water. The reason for this behavior isn't entirely understood. It may be communication, play, or a method of dislodging parasites. Humpbacks are known for their complex songs, long sequences of sounds that males sing during breeding season. Each population has its own song, which evolves slowly over time. Alaska's waters host both resident orcas, which feed primarily on fish, and transient orcas, which hunt marine mammals like seals and sea lions. The two groups, though related, have different cultures, different dialects, and don't interbreed. Sea otters were nearly hunted to extinction in the 18th and 19th centuries for their incredibly dense fur. A sea otter has roughly 800 million hairs, more than any other mammal. This dense fur traps air, providing insulation in cold water. Conservation efforts brought sea otters back from the brink, and they now thrive in many areas. They're tool users, one of the few mammals to regularly employ tools, using rocks to crack open shellfish while floating on their backs. The Bering Sea, between Alaska and Russia, is one of the most productive marine ecosystems on Earth. The continental shelf here is broad and shallow, creating ideal conditions for phytoplankton, which forms the base of the marine food web. The abundance of life supports massive fisheries. Half of all fish caught in the United States comes from the Bering Sea. The waters are also dangerous, with powerful storms, heavy seas, and water cold enough that survival time for someone in the water is measured in minutes. The arrival of Russians in the 18th century began a process of profound change. Russian fur traders, the Promyshleniki, sought sea otter pelts, which were incredibly valuable. They coerced Aleut hunters to work for them, sometimes taking hostages to ensure compliance. Disease, violence, and social disruption caused indigenous populations to decline dramatically. Russian Orthodox missionaries arrived and converted many Alaska natives, leaving a religious legacy that persists today. In 1867, the United States purchased Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million, about 2 cents per acre. Many Americans derided the purchase as Seward's Folly, named after Secretary of State William Seward, who negotiated the deal. Critics saw Alaska as worthless, a frozen wasteland too remote and harsh to be of value. They would be proven spectacularly wrong. For Alaska natives, the transfer from Russian to American control meant little immediate change. They had not been consulted about the sale, and their land rights were not protected. Over time, American settlers arrived, bringing new diseases, new laws, and new pressures. Native children were sent to boarding schools, where they were forbidden to speak their languages or practice their cultures. This deliberate policy of assimilation caused intergenerational trauma, whose effects are still felt today. The Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971 was an attempt to address land rights issues. It extinguished Aboriginal land claims, but provided Alaska Natives with 44 million acres of land and nearly $1 billion in compensation. It also created Alaska Native corporations to manage these resources. The act was controversial and complex, with both positive outcomes and ongoing challenges. Today, Alaska is home to over 730,000 people. About 15% identify as Alaska Native, representing over 20 distinct cultures and over 300 different dialects. Many Alaska Natives live in small villages scattered across the state, continuing subsistence lifestyles that blend traditional practices with modern technology. Salmon, moose, caribou, seal, walrus, and whale remain important food sources. Gathering berries, greens, and medicinal plants continues. These practices aren't just about food security. They're about cultural continuity, about maintaining connections to the land and to ancestors who lived this way for countless generations. Climate change is affecting Alaska more dramatically than most places. The state has warmed twice as fast as the rest of the United States over recent decades. Permafrost is thawing, causing buildings to tilt and sink, roads to buckle, and hillsides to slump. Coastal villages face erosion and flooding as sea ice that once protected shorelines forms later and melts earlier. Some villages are planning to relocate entirely, climate refugees in their own land. Glaciers are retreating at accelerating rates. The Juneau icefield has lost roughly 25% of its volume since the 1700s. Between 2010 and 2020, the icefield lost 1.4 cubic miles of ice each year. Meltwater now flows from Alaska's glaciers at an estimated 50,000 gallons per second. This contributes to global sea level rise and affects local ecosystems. Rivers that depend on glacial meltwater for summer flows may face changes in timing and volume. Wildlife is adapting to warming temperatures in various ways. Some species are expanding their ranges northward. Grizzly bears and polar bears, whose ranges traditionally didn't overlap much, are now sometimes encountering each other, occasionally producing hybrid offspring called growler or pizzly bears. Caribou migrations are being disrupted as the timing of plant growth shifts. Warmer winters can create icing events where rain falls on snow and then freezes, creating an impenetrable barrier that prevents caribou from reaching food underneath. Yet Alaska remains in many ways wild. Nearly 2/3 of the state is managed as public land. National parks, forests, wildlife refuges, and other protected areas. Alaska contains 17 of the 20 highest peaks in the United States. It has more than 3 million lakes. Its rivers include the third longest river in the United States, the 1,980-mile Yukon. The state encompasses 8 national parks, from Denali in the interior to Glacier Bay in the southeast to Kobuk Valley in the northwest, which protects 25 square miles of sand dunes above the Arctic Circle. Gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve in the Brooks Range is one of the most remote national parks in the country, with no roads, no trails, and no designated campsites. Visitors must fly in or hike long distances from the nearest road. The park represents wilderness in its purest form, a landscape that looks much as it did thousands of years ago. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, in the northeast corner of Alaska, protects 19 million acres of tundra, mountains, and coastal plain. It's home to the porcupine caribou herd, polar bears, wolves, and countless migratory birds. The refuge has been at the center of debates over energy development, with some advocating for oil drilling in the coastal plain and others arguing for permanent protection. Alaska's economy relies heavily on natural resource extraction: oil, natural gas, minerals, timber, and fish. The Prudhoe Bay oil field has produced billions of barrels of oil since production began in 1977. Oil revenues transformed Alaska's economy and continue to provide a significant portion of state government income. Each Alaska resident receives an annual dividend from the Alaska Permanent Fund, a sovereign wealth fund created to ensure that oil wealth benefits current and future generations. Tourism has grown to become a major industry. Cruise ships bring hundreds of thousands of visitors through the Inside Passage each summer. Adventure travelers come to climb Denali, kayak among glaciers, and raft wild rivers. People arrive hoping to see bears, whales, and the northern lights. They seek wilderness experiences increasingly rare elsewhere. Alaska continues to inspire artists, writers, and photographers. The landscape's scale and drama have attracted creative people for generations. Jack London wrote vivid tales of the Gold Rush era. John Muir explored and wrote eloquently about Alaska's glaciers. Photographers like Bradford Washburn documented mountains with technical precision and artistic sensitivity. Contemporary Alaska Native artists blend traditional forms with modern themes, creating work that speaks to both continuity and change. The state bird is the willow ptarmigan, a grouse that changes color seasonally, brown in summer and white in winter, perfect camouflage against predators. The state flower is the forget-me-not, a small blue flower that carpets alpine meadows in summer. The state tree is the Sitka spruce, which can grow over 200 feet tall and live for over 700 years. Alaska's motto is "North to the Future," reflecting both geographic reality and aspirational vision. The state flag, designed by a 13-year-old boy named Benny Benson in 1927, features the Big Dipper and the North Star in gold on a blue field. The Big Dipper is part of Ursa Major, the Great Bear constellation, appropriate for a place where bears loom so large. The North Star symbolizes Alaska's northern position and serves as a metaphor for guidance and constancy. Consider the forests. In the southeast, the temperate rainforest is lush, green, dripping with moisture. Trees grow tall and straight. The forest floor is soft, almost spongy underfoot. In the interior, the boreal forest feels different, more sparse, with shorter trees, many of them black spruce that grow slowly in acidic soil over permafrost. The light in the boreal forest has a different quality, filtered through needles rather than broad leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow. Consider the water. Alaska has water in almost every form imaginable. Glacial ice, thousands of years old. Fresh snow, falling silently. Rivers running clear and cold, their water tasting of stone and distance. Lakes reflecting mountains and sky. Waterfalls tumbling down cliffsides. Hot springs bubbling up from underground, creating oases of warmth. Ocean waves breaking against rocky shores. Meltwater trickling from glaciers, milky with rock flour ground fine by ice. Morning dew on tundra plants, fog rolling in from the sea. Consider the light. In summer, light that barely fades, creating endless days that blur together. In winter, darkness that seems absolute, broken only by stars, moon, and aurora. The golden light of late evening in summer, when the sun skims along the northern horizon. The blue light of dawn on snow-covered mountains. The green glow of aurora reflecting off fresh snow. The soft light inside a forest on an overcast day. The brilliant light on glacial ice, blue and white, and almost painful in its intensity. Consider the sounds. The crack of carving ice echoing across water. Wind whistling through mountain passes. Wolves howling in the distance. The rush of a river in spring flood. Salmon splashing as they leap upstream. Ravens calling, their voices somehow both harsh and intelligent. The surprising silence of falling snow. A bear's low grunt. The eerie songs of humpback whales carried through water. Silence so deep it seems to have texture. Consider the smells. Spruce trees releasing their sharp, resinous scent on hot days. Salt and seaweed at the beach. The rich earth smell of tundra in summer when plants are growing frantically. The complete absence of smell in winter when cold locks everything down. Fresh fish. Wood smoke from a cabin. The indescribable scent that accompanies the aurora, described by some as ozone-like, though this may be imagination rather than reality. Alaska teaches lessons about scale, about power, about adaptation. It reminds us that humans are not in charge, not really. A grizzly bear doesn't care about human plans. A storm doesn't check a schedule. Winter comes when it comes and stays until it decides to leave. This can be humbling, which is valuable. It can also be liberating. In wilderness, stripped of many comforts and conveniences, you discover what you truly need, which is often less than you thought. Alaska teaches patience. You wait for weather to clear. You wait for ice to freeze or melt. You wait for salmon to run. You wait for the aurora to appear. You learn that forcing things rarely works. You learn to adjust, to be flexible, to let go of rigid expectations. Alaska teaches attention. When a landscape can be genuinely dangerous, paying attention isn't optional. You watch where you put your feet. You check the weather obsessively. You scan for wildlife. This heightened attention, once learned, can carry over into the rest of life, making you more present, more observant, more engaged with what's actually happening, rather than what you wish or fear might happen. For Alaska natives, the land is more than scenery or resources. It's home, teacher, provider, ancestor, and relative. Traditional ecological knowledge passed down through generations contains detailed understandings of animal behavior, plant properties, weather patterns, ice conditions, and seasonal cycles. This knowledge is place-based, specific to particular regions, developed over thousands of years of careful observation. It's increasingly recognized as valuable not just culturally, but scientifically, offering insights that complement Western scientific approaches. The relationship between Alaska natives and the land is often described as reciprocal. You take what you need, but you also give back through respect, through ceremonies, through sustainable practices, through teaching the next generation. When you hunt a caribou, you use as much of the animal as possible. Nothing is wasted. You offer thanks. You share the meat with others. The caribou has given its life so that you may live, and this gift is treated seriously. Subsistence isn't just about food. It's about identity, about teaching children where they come from, about maintaining connections across generations. When a young person learns to fish for salmon, or prepare seal meat, or gather berries, they're not just learning practical skills. They're learning who they are and how they fit into the world. Alaska holds space for both ancient and modern. In a village, you might see snowmobiles parked outside traditional sod houses. You might use GPS to navigate to a fishing spot your grandfather showed you. You might share photos of your caribou hunt on social media. These aren't contradictions, they're adaptations, ways of maintaining cultural practices in a changing world. The night sky in Alaska, especially in winter, when the air is clear and cold and the aurora isn't active, offers stars in profusions rarely seen elsewhere. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of light. Constellations that are faint or invisible in light-polluted areas blaze clearly. On the darkest, clearest nights, you can see the Andromeda Galaxy with just your eyes, a faint smudge that represents 2.5 million years of traveling light. Alaska's weather can be extreme. The lowest temperature ever recorded in the United States was -80 degrees Fahrenheit at Prospect Creek in 1971. Wind chills in the Arctic can push effective temperatures even lower, into ranges where exposed skin freezes in minutes. Summer temperatures, conversely, can reach into the 90s in the interior, creating a temperature range of over 170 degrees. But it's not just cold that defines Alaskan weather, it's variety. Southeast Alaska's maritime climate is relatively mild but incredibly wet. The interior has wild temperature swings. The Arctic coast is cold and dry. The Aleutians are constantly foggy and windy. A single state encompasses climates ranging from oceanic to continental to Arctic. Alaskans develop particular skills and attitudes toward weather. Layering clothes becomes an art form. You learn that there's no such thing as bad weather, only inadequate preparation. You develop a deep appreciation for sunlight in winter and tolerance for mosquitoes in summer, because those mosquitoes are part of the package. That includes summer's endless days and blooming tundra. The food web in Alaska is complex and interconnected. Salmon returning to rivers carry marine nutrients inland, where they're consumed by bears, eagles, ravens, and countless other species. The bodies of salmon that spawn and expire fertilize the rivers and the surrounding forests. Trees near salmon streams grow faster and larger than trees farther away, nourished by nitrogen from the ocean carried in salmon bodies. Eagles in Alaska exist in numbers unimaginable elsewhere. In some areas, particularly during salmon runs, you might see dozens of bald eagles in a single tree, waiting their turn to feed. The white head and tail of a mature bald eagle stands out starkly against dark feathers, a bird that looks exactly as majestic as its status as national symbol suggests. Ravens in Alaska are treated with particular respect by many indigenous cultures. Raven appears in countless stories as a trickster, transformer, and creator figure. Ravens are remarkably intelligent, able to solve complex problems, use tools, and remember human faces. They play and engage in behaviors that seem to have no purpose beyond enjoyment, suggesting an interior life more complex than we often credit to birds. Think about a glacier for a moment, not as a static thing, but as a dynamic force. A glacier is a river of ice flowing downhill under its own weight. The ice at the surface may move differently than the ice at the bottom. Crevasses open where the glacier flows over irregular bedrock. Meltwater streams flow on, within, and beneath the ice, carving blue tunnels. Rocks frozen into the ice act as tools, grinding and polishing bedrock. When the glacier retreats, it leaves behind a landscape transformed. Valleys carved into U-shapes, rocks ground into flour-fine silt, moraines marking its former extent. Glaciers are also climate archives. Scientists drill ice cores through glaciers, retrieving cylinders of ice that contain trapped air bubbles from the past. These bubbles preserve ancient atmospheres, allowing scientists to measure carbon dioxide concentrations from hundreds or thousands of years ago. Volcanic ash layers in the ice mark eruptions. Pollen grains reveal what plants were growing when the snow fell. The ice remembers. Alaska's salmon runs are legendary, but they're also essential. Entire ecosystems depend on the annual return of salmon. If the runs fail, bears struggle to put on enough fat for hibernation. Eagles have less food. Rivers receive fewer nutrients. The interconnections run deep. Protecting salmon means protecting watersheds, which means managing forests properly, controlling pollution, considering climate change impacts. Let's think about the seasons in Alaska more deeply, because they're not like seasons elsewhere. They're extremes, each one distinct and powerful in its own way. Spring in Alaska is brief and explosive. After months of cold and darkness, when warmth finally arrives, the world seems to wake all at once. Migratory birds return in enormous numbers. The tundra, which looked brown and lifeless, suddenly erupts in color as tiny flowers bloom in profusion. These Arctic flowers have short windows of opportunity. They must grow, flower, and set seed in just a few weeks. So they bloom en masse, turning the landscape into carpets of purple lupine, yellow Arctic poppies, pink fireweed, and white mountain avens. The breakup of river ice is a dramatic event. All winter, rivers are frozen solid, highways of ice and snow. Then, as temperatures rise, the ice begins to crack and shift. Huge chunks break free and start moving downstream. Sometimes ice jams form, creating temporary dams that cause flooding when they finally give way. In some towns, there are betting pools on the exact moment the river ice will break up. People gather to watch the spectacle, this annual reminder that winter's grip is finally loosening. Bears emerge from their dens in spring, groggy and hungry after months of sleep. A female grizzly who entered her den pregnant will emerge with cubs, tiny and vulnerable, born during the winter while she slept. These cubs have never seen the world before. Everything is new: sunlight, wind, the smell of earth, the sight of other animals. The mother must teach them everything: what to eat, what to fear, how to survive. Bird migration in spring is one of nature's great phenomena. Millions of birds fly north to Alaska to breed, taking advantage of the long days and abundance of insects. The tundra becomes a nursery for shorebirds from around the world. Arctic terns make the longest migration of any animal, flying from Antarctic waters to the Arctic and back each year, a round trip of over 40,000 miles. They experience more daylight than any other creature on Earth, following summer from pole to pole. Summer in Alaska is intense, not in heat necessarily, though it can be warm, but in light and life. In the far north, the sun never sets. This phenomenon, the midnight sun, creates an altered sense of time. Daylight becomes constant. You can go hiking at midnight. Gardens grow enormous vegetables. Children play outside at all hours. Sleep can become challenging when it's bright at 2 in the morning. People develop strategies: blackout curtains, sleep masks, rigid schedules. The plant growth during summer is remarkable. With nearly 24 hours of sunlight and nutrients from long, cold winters, plants can grow to extraordinary sizes. Cabbages weighing over 100 pounds have been grown in the Matanuska Valley. Flowers bloom in profusions rarely seen elsewhere. The growing season is short, perhaps only 90 to 120 days, depending on location, so plants make the most of every moment. Mosquitoes and other biting insects emerge in summer in vast numbers. On the tundra especially, the air can be thick with them. This isn't just an annoyance. These insects are a crucial food source for birds. Migratory birds time their arrival to coincide with peak insect abundance, ensuring food for their growing chicks. Without mosquitoes, many bird populations would struggle. So Alaskans endure the bugs with varying degrees of grace, understanding they're part of the ecosystem. Commercial fishing peaks in summer. The waters around Alaska teem with salmon, halibut, cod, and other species. Fishing boats work around the clock during openings when regulations allow fishing. It's grueling, dangerous work. Fishermen face storms, cold water, long hours, and the constant risk of injury. But for many, it's a way of life, passed down through generations. The smell of fish and salt water, the sound of gulls, the feel of deck beneath your feet, these become part of identity. Fall arrives early in Alaska. By late August, the light is noticeably different. The angle of the sun has changed, shadows grow longer, the air carries a hint of coming cold. Leaves begin to turn. The aspen and birch in the interior transform into brilliant gold, entire hillsides glowing in the slanted light. Blueberries, cranberries, and other wild berries ripen. People head into the hills to pick, filling buckets that will provide fruit through winter. This is when many animals are most active, preparing for winter. Bears enter a state called hyperphagia, where they eat almost constantly, consuming as much as 20,000 calories per day. They must build up fat reserves sufficient to survive months without food. Salmon runs peak. Bears gather at rivers and streams, fishing with focused intensity. A bear might catch and eat dozens of salmon in a single day, sometimes eating only the fattiest parts and leaving the rest, which other animals then scavenge. Caribou begin their fall migration, moving from summer calving grounds to winter ranges. The sight of thousands of caribou moving across the landscape is primordial, a reminder of how the world once was, when great herds of animals migrated freely across continents. The ground trembles with their passing. The air fills with the clicking sound their ankle tendons make, a biological adaptation that helps them walk through deep snow by spreading their hooves wide. Moose enter the rut in fall. Bulls, which spent the summer growing antlers, now use those antlers to fight for mating rights. The clash of antlers echoes through forests. Bulls become aggressive and unpredictable, which makes encountering one particularly dangerous. After the rut, bulls will shed their antlers. Growing them again next spring will take enormous energy, requiring minerals that bulls obtain by eating aquatic vegetation from ponds and lakes. The aurora becomes visible again in fall as the nights grow longer and darker. After months when the sky never really darkened, suddenly there are hours of true darkness, and with clear skies and active solar conditions, the lights return. For those who live in Alaska, seeing the first aurora of the season feels like a homecoming, a reminder of the cycle of the year. Winter in Alaska is long, dark, and cold, but it's not monolithic. Winter in Juneau, with temperatures often in the 20s and 30s Fahrenheit, and constant rain or snow, feels nothing like winter in Fairbanks, where -40 is common, and the air is dry and still. Winter on the coast, with storms and wind and blowing snow, differs from winter in the interior, where cold settles in and stays, creating temperature inversions where valleys fill with cold air and only the mountaintops are warm. The darkness of winter, especially in the far north, is profound. In Utqiagvik, the sun sets in mid-November and doesn't rise again until late January. That's over 60 days without direct sunlight. There's some twilight, a few hours each day when the sky lightens, but the sun never appears above the horizon. This darkness affects people in various ways. Some struggle with seasonal affective disorder, a form of depression linked to lack of light. Others find the darkness peaceful, meditative even, a time for rest and reflection. Winter activities in Alaska are distinctive. Dog mushing, the state sport, developed as practical transportation but has evolved into recreation and competition. The Iditarod Trail sled dog race, running from Anchorage to Nome, covers over 1,000 miles of remote, challenging terrain. Mushers and their dog teams face extreme cold, whiteout conditions, overflow and exhaustion. The race takes 8 to 15 days, depending on conditions and the team. It commemorates the 1925 Serum Run to Nome, when mushers relayed diphtheria antitoxin across Alaska to stop an outbreak, a heroic effort in brutal conditions. Ice fishing is popular throughout winter. Augers drill holes through ice that can be several feet thick. Fishermen set up shelters over the holes, sometimes elaborate heated structures. They drop lines through the holes and wait, a practice requiring patience and tolerance for cold. The fish that live beneath the ice continue their lives largely unaffected by the frozen surface above them, swimming in water that stays just above freezing. Skiing takes various forms in Alaska. Cross-country skiing is common, both for recreation and for accessing remote areas. Downhill skiing happens at several resorts. Heli-skiing, where helicopters drop skiers on remote mountain peaks for pristine powder runs, attracts adventurous skiers from around the world. The mountains of Alaska, with deep snowpack and challenging terrain, offer skiing experiences difficult to match elsewhere. Winter also brings unique challenges. Vehicle maintenance becomes crucial. Batteries fail in extreme cold. Oil thickens. Tires lose pressure. Many Alaskans use engine block heaters, plugging their vehicles in overnight to keep the engine warm enough to start in the morning. In the coldest areas, vehicles might be left running all day because restarting them is uncertain. Buildings must be designed for cold. Insulation is critical. Double or triple pane windows are standard. Heating systems must be reliable. A heating failure in winter can quickly become life-threatening. In areas with permafrost, buildings require special foundations to prevent heat from the building from thawing the permafrost, which would cause settling and structural failure. Some buildings are elevated on posts to allow cold air to circulate underneath, keeping the permafrost frozen. Permafrost itself is fascinating and complex. It's ground that remains frozen for at least 2 consecutive years, but some permafrost has been frozen for thousands of years. Permafrost can extend hundreds or even thousands of feet deep. Within the permafrost, you might find preserved remains of animals that went extinct thousands of years ago. Woolly mammoth tusks and bones are sometimes discovered eroding from riverbanks. These remains, frozen since the Ice Age, can be remarkably well preserved, still containing DNA. The active layer, the top portion of soil that thaws each summer, can be just a few feet deep or less. Plants must send their roots into this shallow layer. Trees in permafrost regions often can't grow very large because their roots can't penetrate deep enough for good anchorage. Black spruce trees in the interior might be 60 years old, but only 10 feet tall, growing incredibly slowly in the challenging conditions. When permafrost thaws, dramatic changes occur. The ground can become unstable, creating features called thermokarst. As ice within the permafrost melts, the ground collapses, forming depressions that fill with water, creating new ponds and lakes. Hillsides can slump, roads buckle and heave, buildings tilt. These changes are accelerating as climate warms, presenting significant challenges for infrastructure and communities. Permafrost also stores vast amounts of carbon, organic material that has been frozen for millennia. As permafrost thaws, microbes begin breaking down this organic matter, releasing carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. This creates a feedback loop. Warming causes permafrost to thaw, which releases greenhouse gases, which causes more warming. The amount of carbon stored in permafrost globally is roughly twice the amount currently in the atmosphere, making permafrost thaw a significant climate concern. Alaska's volcanoes deserve more attention, for they are among the most active in the United States. The Aleutian volcanic arc contains over 40 active volcanoes, part of the ring of fire that encircles the Pacific. These volcanoes form where the Pacific tectonic plate subducts beneath the North American plate. As the oceanic plate descends into the Earth's mantle, it melts, and the resulting magma rises to form volcanoes. Eruptions in Alaska are common. Augustine Volcano, in Lower Cook Inlet, has erupted numerous times in recorded history. Redoubt Volcano, northwest of Anchorage, erupted as recently as 2009, producing spectacular lava fountains and ash clouds. Pavlov Volcano, on the Alaska Peninsula, erupts frequently, sometimes several times per decade. These eruptions usually produce ash clouds that rise thousands of feet, occasionally disrupting air traffic. The 1912 eruption of Novarupta, in what is now Katmai National Park, was one of the largest volcanic eruptions of the 20th century. It expelled roughly 15 cubic kilometers of material, creating the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, so named because of the numerous fumaroles that steamed for years afterward. The eruption darkened skies across the northern hemisphere and lowered global temperatures measurably. Volcanic landscapes in Alaska have a stark beauty. Fresh lava flows are black, rough, and barren. Over time, lichens colonize, then mosses, then plants, in a slow process of succession. Volcanic ash, rich in minerals, creates fertile soil once weathered. Many of Alaska's most productive areas owe their fertility to ancient volcanic activity. Hot springs occur where geothermal heat warms groundwater, which then rises to the surface. Chena Hot Springs, northeast of Fairbanks, maintains natural pools with water temperatures around 160 degrees Fahrenheit. People soak in cooled pools, luxuriating in the warmth while surrounded by winter cold, steam rising into frozen air. It's surreal, sitting in hot water while snow falls around you, your hair freezing even as your body is warm. Alaska's indigenous oral traditions contain stories passed down through countless generations. These stories serve multiple purposes: entertainment, education, history, and moral instruction. They explain natural phenomena, teach appropriate behavior, record historical events, and maintain connections to ancestors and places. Many stories feature animals as characters, reflecting the close relationship between people and the natural world. Raven, as mentioned earlier, is a central figure in many traditions. In Tlingit stories, Raven brought light to the world, stole the sun and moon and stars from a powerful being and released them into the sky. Raven is clever, mischievous, hungry, and creative. Raven transforms things, breaks rules, makes mistakes, and somehow usually comes out ahead. Raven stories are often funny, even when they teach serious lessons. Other stories explain landscape features. A particular mountain might be a transformed person or animal. A river's course might result from actions in the distant past. These stories encode geographical knowledge, embedding information about places within narratives that are easier to remember than abstract directions or descriptions. The potlatch is an important ceremony among many Northwest Coast cultures. A potlatch marks significant events: births, marriages, the raising of a totem pole, the assumption of a name or title. The host family provides an enormous feast and gives away valuable gifts to guests. The more you give away, the higher your status. This practice, which seemed economically irrational to outsiders, actually serves important social functions: redistributing wealth, establishing relationships, validating claims and identities, and displaying generosity. Potlatches were actually banned by the Canadian and American governments for many decades, seen as wasteful and contrary to Christian values. The ban was a form of cultural suppression. When potlatches were legalized again in the 1950s, they resumed, adapting to modern contexts, but maintaining core values of generosity, reciprocity, and community. Totem poles, mentioned earlier, are not religious objects. They're not idols or objects of worship. They're historical records, family crests, and public art. Each figure on a totem pole represents something: a clan symbol, a legendary event, a specific ancestor. Reading a totem pole requires cultural knowledge. Without context, you see carved figures. With context, you see a rich narrative, a family's history rendered in cedar. The carving of totem poles was nearly lost. Missionaries and government officials discouraged the practice. Many poles were taken to museums. Few carvers remained who knew the traditional forms and meanings. But in recent decades, there's been a revival. Master carvers have trained apprentices. New poles have been raised. Old poles in museums have been repatriated or had replicas returned to communities. This cultural renewal represents resilience and determination. Basket weaving is another art form maintained, despite pressures to abandon traditional practices. Alaska Native baskets are functional and beautiful. Different cultures have distinct styles. U-pick coiled grass baskets are woven so tightly they can hold water. Tlingit spruce root baskets feature intricate geometric designs. Athabascan birch bark baskets are sturdy and lightweight. Creating a basket requires gathering materials at the right time of year, processing them properly, and countless hours of patient work. A single basket might represent weeks or months of effort. These art forms are not stuck in the past. Contemporary Alaska Native artists work in traditional media and modern forms. They blend old techniques with new visions. They make art that speaks to both cultural continuity and present-day reality. They address issues like climate change, cultural survival, and identity through their work. The Alaska Native Language Center at the University of Alaska Fairbanks works to document and preserve Alaska's indigenous languages. Many of these languages are endangered. When a language disappears, it takes with it unique ways of understanding and describing the world. Languages encode knowledge, detailed taxonomies of plants and animals, descriptions of ice conditions, words for relationships and emotions that don't exist in English. Losing a language is losing a library, a way of thinking, a connection to ancestors. Language revitalization efforts include teaching classes, creating immersion programs, producing dictionaries and learning materials, and recording elders speaking traditional languages. Some communities have established language nests, where young children are cared for entirely in the traditional language, similar to how they would have learned language historically. Alaska's freshwater systems are extensive and complex. Over 3 million lakes dot the landscape, from small tundra ponds to massive bodies of water like Iliamna Lake, which covers over 1,000 square miles and is deeper than 600 feet in places. These lakes formed in various ways. Some occupy depressions carved by glaciers. Some fill volcanic calderas. Some formed when permafrost thawed. Each lake is an ecosystem, hosting fish, aquatic invertebrates, waterfowl, and sometimes larger animals. Rivers in Alaska range from small, clear streams to enormous, muddy channels. The Yukon River, draining a basin larger than Texas, carries vast amounts of water. During spring breakup, the flow increases dramatically as snowmelt and ice contribute. The water turns grey with suspended sediment. Ice chunks the size of houses move downstream. The power of the water is humbling, a reminder that nature operates on scales beyond human control. Many Alaskan rivers are glacially fed, which gives them distinctive characteristics. Glacial rivers carry fine rock flour, ground by glaciers from bedrock, which gives the water a milky turquoise color. This suspended sediment makes the water opaque. You can't see more than a few inches down. The temperature stays near freezing. The flow fluctuates with temperature. On hot days, more glacier ice melts and the river rises. Fish that live in these glacial rivers have adapted to the challenging conditions. They can navigate in turbid water, finding their way by scent and other cues. They can tolerate cold that would immobilize fish from warmer climates. Their life cycles are timed to seasonal patterns of flow and temperature. Alaska's position at the intersection of several major air masses creates variable weather. Arctic air from the north is cold and dry. Pacific maritime air from the south is mild and wet. Continental air from the interior of North America can be hot in summer and bitterly cold in winter. When these air masses meet, weather happens, sometimes dramatically. Storms can intensify rapidly. Blizzards can reduce visibility to zero. Wind can reach hurricane force. The concept of wilderness is complicated. For many settlers and tourists, Alaska represents wilderness, a place apart from civilization, untouched and pure. But for Alaska natives, this framing is problematic. The land isn't wilderness, it's home, managed and shaped by human activity for thousands of years. The idea that Alaska was empty, waiting to be discovered, erases the presence and agency of the people who were already there. Weather forecasting in Alaska is challenging. Remote areas have few weather stations. Terrain affects local conditions dramatically. Mountains create their own weather. Valleys can trap cold air. Coastal areas differ from inland areas just miles away. Pilots become expert at reading clouds, wind, and subtle signs. Aviation in Alaska developed differently than elsewhere because of these challenges. Bush pilots are legendary figures in Alaska. These aviators fly small planes to remote areas with no roads, no runways, often no navigational aids. They land on gravel bars, on beaches, on frozen lakes. They deliver mail, supplies, and people. They evacuate medical emergencies. They enable research and access to wilderness. Flying in. Alaska requires skill, judgment, and respect for weather and terrain. Many communities rely entirely on aviation for connection to the rest of the world. Float planes, equipped with pontoons, can land on water. Ski planes can land on snow and ice. Some planes have oversized tires for rough terrain. These aircraft become extensions of the landscape, moving between elements as needed. The sound of a plane engine is part of the soundscape in rural Alaska, a lifeline arriving or departing. Alaska has more pilots per capita than any other state. Many Alaskans own planes. For some, it's recreation. For others, it's necessary transportation. Flying yourself to a remote lake for fishing, or to a cabin accessible no other way, or to visit family in another village, is normal. The freedom this provides is remarkable, but the risks are real. Alaska's aviation accident rate is higher than the national average. Weather, terrain, and distances combine to create hazards even experienced pilots respect. The history of aviation in Alaska includes pioneering flights. Wiley Post and Harold Gatty set records. Carl Ben Eielson flew the first airmail in Alaska. Noel Wien started Wien Air Alaska. These early aviators proved that aircraft could operate in Arctic conditions, opening Alaska in ways previously impossible. Before aviation, travel between many locations took weeks or months. After aviation, the same journeys took hours. Alaska's islands number in the thousands. Some are substantial, like Kodiak Island, which covers over 3,500 square miles and is the second largest island in the United States after Hawaii's Big Island. Others are tiny, just rocks protruding from the sea. Each island is its own ecosystem, sometimes with species found nowhere else. The ABC Islands, Admiralty, Baranof, and Chichagof in southeast Alaska, support one of the highest densities of brown bears anywhere. These islands have abundant salmon, which allows bear populations to thrive. Admiralty Island alone has an estimated 1,700 brown bears, meaning bears outnumber humans significantly. The Tlingit name for Admiralty Island, Kutsnawu, means Fortress of the Bears. Island ecosystems are often fragile. Introduced species can devastate native populations that evolved without certain predators or competitors. Rats arriving on islands from ships have caused extinctions of ground-nesting seabirds. Conservationists work to remove invasive species and protect native communities. But it's challenging work, requiring sustained effort. Tides in Alaska vary greatly depending on location. The largest tides, in Upper Cook Inlet, result from the inlet's shape, which amplifies tidal action. Water funnels into a narrowing space, increasing height. These tides create dangerous conditions. Tidal currents can reach several knots. Standing waves form. Tidal bores, walls of water traveling upstream against normal flow, can be several feet high. Extreme tidal ranges create intertidal zones with rich biodiversity. At low tide, vast areas of mudflats and rocks are exposed. Barnacles, mussels, seaweed, sea stars, crabs, and countless other organisms populate these areas. Shorebirds probe the mud for invertebrates. Sea otters search tide pools. At high tide, all of this is submerged, hidden until the tide recedes again. Kelp forests grow in cold waters along Alaska's coast. These forests, formed by giant kelp that can grow over 100 feet tall, create habitat for numerous species. Fish hide among the fronds. Sea otters wrap themselves in kelp to keep from drifting. Kelp forests are incredibly productive, photosynthesizing rapidly and providing food and shelter. They're also vulnerable to changes in water temperature and to sea urchin populations, which can graze kelp down to nothing if urchin predators like sea otters are absent. Whaling was historically important to coastal Alaska Native cultures. Bowhead whales, massive animals weighing up to 100 tons, were hunted using traditional methods passed down through generations. The hunt was communal, involving entire villages. Success meant food, oil, and bone that would sustain the community. Whaling was also spiritual, surrounded by ceremonies, songs, and protocols. Today, subsistence whaling continues under international regulations that recognize indigenous rights while ensuring whale populations remain sustainable. The International Whaling Commission sets quotas. Alaska Native communities can take a limited number of bowhead whales annually. The hunt uses traditional boats and some modern equipment. When a whale is taken, it's shared throughout the community, according to traditional rules. Every part of the whale is used, nothing is wasted. The hunt maintains cultural practices and provides food that is nutritionally important and culturally central. Alaska's mineral wealth extends beyond oil. Gold, of course, drew thousands during various rushes. Gold mining continues today, both as large operations and small-scale efforts. Hard rock mining extracts copper, zinc, lead, and other metals. Coal deposits exist in several areas. Jade, the state gem, is found on the Seward Peninsula. This jade, usually a vibrant green nephrite, is prized by carvers and collectors. The environmental impacts of mining are significant. Open-pit mines create enormous scars. Tailings piles contain potentially toxic materials. Acid mine drainage can poison streams for decades. Balancing economic benefits with environmental protection remains contentious. Some see mining as essential for Alaska's economy. Others argue that protecting intact ecosystems should take priority. Both perspectives include sincere people with reasonable concerns. Forestry in southeast Alaska has its own complex history. The Tongass National Forest has been logged extensively in some areas. Clear-cutting large areas alters watersheds, affects wildlife, and changes the character of forests. Generations. Old-growth forest, once cut, takes centuries to return to its previous state. Logging provided jobs and economic activity. It also generated conflict between those who valued timber production and those who prioritized ecosystem protection. The balance has shifted over time. Less logging occurs now than in previous decades. Second-growth forests are maturing, though they lack many characteristics of old growth. Debates continue about appropriate management, about what role humans should play in these forests, about whose interests matter most. Winter survival skills are essential in Alaska. Knowing how to stay warm, find shelter, navigate, and signal for help can mean the difference between life and tragedy. People caught unprepared in cold can experience hypothermia rapidly. Body temperature drops, coordination fails, judgment becomes impaired, decision-making suffers. Eventually, if warming doesn't occur, core temperature drops to levels incompatible with survival. Layering clothes is fundamental. A base layer wicks moisture away from skin. An insulating middle layer, often fleece or down, traps warm air. An outer shell blocks wind and precipitation. Keeping dry is crucial because wet clothes lose their insulating properties. Cotton is particularly bad in cold. When wet, it provides almost no warmth and is slow to dry. Wool and synthetics maintain some insulating capacity even when damp. Eating enough calories matters in cold. Your body burns energy maintaining its temperature. In extreme cold, you might need thousands of additional calories per day. Fat is particularly valuable, providing concentrated energy. Traditional northern diets, high in fat from animals like seal, whale, and salmon, evolved to meet these needs. Shelter makes enormous difference. Getting out of wind cuts heat loss significantly. A snow cave, dug into a snowbank, can be surprisingly warm, with interior temperatures well above outside air. Body heat alone can raise temperature inside a snow shelter. An igloo, properly constructed, can be even warmer, with temperatures inside reaching above freezing even when outside air is far below. Fire provides heat, light, and psychological comfort. Starting fire in cold, with numb fingers, possibly with damp materials, requires practice and proper equipment. Carrying multiple fire-starting methods, waterproof matches, lighters, and ferro rods increases chances of success. Knowing how to find and prepare tinder and kindling in winter conditions is valuable knowledge. The concept of moose nugget humor is very Alaska. Moose droppings, oval pellets about an inch long, have become symbols of Alaska in an ironic way. Gift shops sell moose nugget earrings, moose nugget swizzle sticks, chocolate-covered moose nuggets. This humor, making light of something mundane, reflects a certain Alaskan sensibility. Practical, a bit irreverent, finding amusement in everyday wilderness realities. Alaska's official state flag was designed when Alaska was still a territory. Benny Benson, a 13-year-old boy living in an orphanage, won a contest with his design. His concept was simple and powerful. Gold stars on a blue field, representing the night sky, the gold of Alaska's future, and the Big Dipper pointing to the North Star. His prize was $1,000 and a watch engraved with the flag design. The flag has become iconic, recognized worldwide, and displayed with pride. State symbols include the willow ptarmigan as state bird. This grouse is well adapted to cold, with feathered feet that act like snowshoes and seasonal color changes for camouflage. The forget-me-not, state flower, is delicate and beautiful, tiny blue flowers with yellow centers. The Sitka spruce, state tree, grows tall and straight, providing timber and habitat. The dog mushing, state sport, reflects both history and ongoing culture. These symbols collectively represent aspects of Alaska's identity. The Iditarod Trail sled dog race deserves more attention because it represents so much. The trail itself is historic, used for centuries by Alaska natives, and then by gold miners and mail carriers. The race commemorates the Serum Run, but also celebrates the human-dog partnership central to northern life. Mushers and their teams develop deep bonds. Dogs are athletes, bred and trained for endurance and speed. They live to run. A good sled dog team, working together, can travel remarkable distances in challenging conditions. The race route alternates between northern and southern courses every other year. Checkpoints are remote villages where mushers rest, receive supplies, and have their dogs checked by veterinarians. The strategy involves knowing when to push and when to rest, both for yourself and your team. Sleep deprivation becomes significant. Hallucinations can occur. Mushers must care for dogs before themselves, feeding the team, checking feet, providing rest. Weather along the trail can be brutal. Temperatures might hit -50 or colder. Wind chills reach dangerous levels. Whiteout conditions reduce visibility to feet. Overflow, where water flows over ice, can soak a team. Dealing with these challenges while exhausted tests human limits. Finishing the Iditarod is an achievement. Winning it requires exceptional skill, dog care, strategy, and luck. Subsistence harvests follow seasonal patterns. Spring brings waterfowl and their eggs. Summer brings salmon, berries, and edible plants. Fall brings caribou, moose, and more berries. Winter brings ice fishing and trapping. Each season offers different foods, and traditional knowledge includes knowing when and where to harvest, how to process what you've gathered, and how to store it. Food preservation without modern technology requires knowledge and effort. Fish are dried, smoked, or fermented. Meat is dried or frozen naturally in winter. Berries are dried, made into a kutak, a traditional food sometimes called Eskimo ice cream that combines berries with fat and sometimes fish or meat. These foods are nutritious, flavorful, and connected to place and tradition. Modern subsistence continues these practices, but might use rifles instead of bows, motorboats instead of kayaks, freezers instead of caches. The technology changes, but the relationship to the land and the importance of harvesting your own food remain. For many Alaska natives, buying all food from stores would be economically difficult, but also culturally impoverishing. The act of harvesting connects you to the land, teaches younger generations, and maintains practices that define who you are. Alaska's population is distributed unevenly. Over half live in Anchorage and surrounding areas. Fairbanks holds another significant portion. Juneau, the capital, has about 32,000 residents. Beyond these centers, population density drops dramatically. Entire regions have more animals than people. You can fly for hours without seeing a building or road. This emptiness, if you want to call it that, though it's full of life, is increasingly rare on Earth. The Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act of 1980 protected vast areas, but also created complex jurisdictions and access issues. It guaranteed subsistence hunting and fishing rights for rural residents, but defining rural and balancing subsistence needs with conservation goals has proven challenging. These aren't academic questions. They affect real people's ability to feed their families and maintain their cultural practices. Alaska's future is uncertain in some ways, like anywhere. Climate change will continue to reshape the landscape. Political debates over resource development versus conservation will continue. Rural villages face challenges maintaining viable communities as young people move to cities for education and employment. Urban areas face challenges providing infrastructure and services as populations grow. Yet, Alaska also offers hope. It demonstrates that large-scale conservation is possible, that wildness can persist even in the modern world. It shows that indigenous cultures can adapt and survive despite enormous pressures. It reminds us that the Earth is still capable of inspiring awe, that there are still places that feel genuinely wild, where the hand of humanity hasn't controlled or manicured every square foot. As you drift now, perhaps towards sleep, let Alaska settle in your mind. Not as a collection of facts or statistics, but as a feeling. The sense of space, of cold air, of distant mountains. The idea that such places exist, that right now, as you rest, grizzly bears are sleeping in dens, salmon are swimming in dark rivers, the aurora is or isn't dancing over snowy tundra, glaciers are creaking and groaning and very slowly flowing, and wolves are moving through forests under stars. Let yourself imagine standing on a mountain ridge in Denali National Park. It's a clear August day. Below you, valleys stretch for miles, braided rivers gleaming silver. Caribou move in the distance, small as insects from this height. The air is thin and clear. Behind you, Denali rises, impossibly massive, its summit wreathed in clouds. The tundra beneath your feet is spongy, covered in berries and lichens, in tiny flowers. You can see for what feels like forever. There's no sound except wind and your own breathing. Or imagine floating in a kayak in Prince William Sound. The water is calm, glassy, reflecting clouds perfectly. Ahead, a tidewater glacier rises like a frozen cathedral. Its face is maybe 200 feet tall, blue and white and ancient. As you watch, A piece of ice cracks free with a sound like gunfire. It falls, hits the water, sends waves radiating outward. Smaller chunks follow. The waves reach your kayak, rocking you gently. Ice bobs around you, thousands of years of winter broken into pieces, slowly melting. Or imagine a village on the Arctic coast in January. It's afternoon, but the sun won't rise. The sky is deep blue, shading to black. Stars are everywhere. The temperature is -40. Sound carries strangely in the cold. Smoke rises straight up from chimneys. Dogs are curled tight in their houses. Inside, a stove radiates heat. Seal meat is cooking. Someone is teaching a child to speak words in Iupiaq. Outside, the aurora begins. First a glow, then ribbons of green and red dancing across the entire sky. Alaska doesn't demand that you visit, though it welcomes those who come with respect and preparation. It simply exists, doing what it does, being what it is. Glaciers keep carving, salmon keep returning, bears keep hunting, ravens keep calling. The aurora keeps dancing, mountains keep standing, wilderness keeps persisting. In a world that often feels crowded, controlled, and increasingly homogeneous, Alaska matters. It matters because it shows us that other ways are possible, that beauty can exist on a scale that diminishes human concerns, that wildness still has places to be wild, that indigenous peoples can maintain connections to land and culture despite everything, that we can choose to protect rather than exploit, at least sometimes, at least in some places. Alaska won't solve everything wrong with the world. It's not a paradise. It has problems, conflicts, inequities. Climate change is affecting it dramatically. But it offers something increasingly rare: authenticity. Alaska doesn't pretend to be something it isn't. It doesn't apologize for being cold or remote or challenging. It simply is, vast and complex and beautiful and harsh and ancient and changing. As sleep finds you, let your last thoughts be gentle ones. Perhaps you're thinking of how light looks on glacier ice, that particular shade of blue that seems to glow from within. Or the sound of a raven's call echoing off a mountainside. Or the warmth of a cabin when it's cold outside. Or the taste of fresh salmon. Or the sight of a bear walking along a ridge, backlit by the setting sun. Alaska teaches us that we're small, which is not a bad thing. It teaches us that we're part of something larger, which is comforting. It teaches us that the world is still full of mystery and majesty, which is necessary. You don't need to visit Alaska to appreciate it. Simply knowing it exists, that such places are still there, that glaciers are still flowing, and wolves are still howling, and the aurora is still dancing. That's enough. It means the world is larger than shopping malls and traffic and screens. It means wildness persists. It means the great land lives up to its name. So rest now. Let Alaska fade into dream. Perhaps your dream of flying over mountains, or watching whales breach, or standing under the aurora, or walking through endless forests, or floating in a kayak among icebergs. Whatever you dream, may it be peaceful. May it be restorative. May it remind you of spaces, of stillness, of beauty beyond human making. The glaciers will still be there tomorrow, even if they're smaller than today. The mountains will still stand. The rivers will still flow. The bears will still fish for salmon. The eagles will still soar. The ravens will still call. And somewhere, someone under the northern lights will look up in wonder, as humans have done for thousands of years, and feel simultaneously small and connected, alone and part of everything. You have done enough for today. You have learned. You have wondered. You have traveled in your mind to a place vast and cold and beautiful. That's plenty. More than plenty. Now, close your eyes if they aren't already closed. Let your breathing slow. Let your body sink deeper into comfort. Let Alaska become a feeling rather than thoughts, a sense of space and ice and light and wildness. Let that feeling carry you gently into rest. The great land will be there when you wake. It's been there for millions of years, shaped by ice and time and the patient work of geology and life. It will be there tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. It doesn't need you to stay awake worrying about it. It simply needs you to know it exists, to remember that such places are real, and to rest. So rest now. Dream of glaciers and mountains, of northern lights and midnight sun, of bears and salmon and eagles and wolves. Dream of rivers and forests and tundra and sea. Dream of a place so large it holds space for everything, including your peaceful sleep. From the Sleepy Library, good night. May your dreams carry you to vast landscapes and peaceful waters. May you wake refreshed, carrying a small piece of Alaska's spaciousness in your heart. Sleep well.